The chandeliers of Hale's Crown glittered like constellations above a sea of designer suits and sparkling gowns. It was the kind of night when fortunes were toasted and reputations were built on the shimmer of champagne. But amid the clinking glasses and laughter, one sound cut through like glass, Richard Hale's voice. "Stop right there," he barked, his tone cold enough to freeze the room. Every conversation died instantly. The waitstaff froze mid-step. In the center of the grand dining room stood a young waitress, her tray trembling in her hands. Her name was Anna Parker. Richard's eyes narrowed at her shoes, old, faded leather flats with scuffed heels and a small tear near the toe. "Are you kidding me?" he said, his voice laced with disgust. "This is Hale's Crown, not some diner off the highway. Look at yourself. You represent my brand." Anna's cheeks flushed crimson. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" He cut her off. "Didn't mean what? To embarrass this establishment in front of my guests? Do you have any idea who's sitting here tonight?" Her voice broke slightly. "Sir, these are the only shoes I—" Richard's hand shot up, silencing her. "Enough. You're fired. Right here, right now." A sharp gasp rippled through the dining room. The guests exchanged glances, pretending to sip their wine while savoring the scene like a piece of theater. Anna stood still, clutching her tray, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Take off your apron and get out," Richard added, his tone final. Her lips trembled. She slowly untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table beside him. "Yes, sir," she whispered. The head waiter tried to intervene. "Sir, perhaps this isn't the best time." Richard turned on him. "Do you want to join her?" Silence. Anna turned toward the exit, her head bowed. Her chest burned with humiliation. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes following her. The laughter resumed softly, like the closing of a curtain after a cruel play. At the door, she hesitated. She looked down at her shoes, her mother's shoes, the last thing she owned that connected her to the woman who'd raised her alone. Her mother had worn them through storms, through job interviews, through nights of standing long hours just to feed them both. To Anna, they weren't just shoes. They were a symbol of survival. Outside, the city lights blurred through her tears. Rain began to fall, slow at first, then steady. She stood under the awning, clutching her apron like a lifeline. Behind her, through the glass, she could still see Richard Hale laughing with his investors. His smile wan and artificial. He didn't even glance her way. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the rain. "You didn't have to do it like that." Her reflection in the glass looked fragile, like someone else entirely. Then a voice came from behind her, a deep, steady baritone. "Rough night?" She turned. An older man stood a few feet away, holding a black umbrella. His silver hair gleamed under the streetlight. He wasn't dressed like a customer, no arrogance, no luxury watch, just quiet confidence. Anna wiped her tears quickly. "You could say that." He handed her the umbrella. "You shouldn't have been fired for your shoes," he said simply. She frowned, caught off guard. "You saw that?" "Everyone saw it," he said, "but not everyone understood what they were seeing." Before she could respond, he slipped a small card into her hand and smiled gently. "Keep this. When you're ready, call me." She looked down. The rain smeared the ink slightly, but 3 words remained clear. "Edward Collins Group." She looked up again. He was gone. Only the empty street, the falling rain, and the faint sound of laughter from the world she'd just been cast out of. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet thought began to flicker. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. The next morning, the city was already alive with its usual chaos. Honking taxis, barking dogs, and the rhythm of people chasing something they'd never quite catch. But for Anna Parker, everything felt frozen. The humiliation from the night before clung to her like smoke she couldn't wash off. Her apartment was barely more than a shoebox on the edge of Queens. The walls were thin enough to hear her neighbor's TV through them, and the radiator hissed like a snake. She sat at the tiny kitchen table, staring at the classified ads spread out in front of her. The words blurred together. Wait staff needed. Experience required. No openings. She rubbed her temples and whispered, "You've got to keep moving, Anna. Just keep moving." A framed photo sat on the table beside her, a younger version of her mother, smiling in a faded diner uniform. Anna reached out, touching the edge of the frame. "Mum," she said softly, "you'd tell me to stand tall, wouldn't you? Even when they push you down." Her mother, Laura Parker, had worked her whole life in restaurants. She'd taught Anna to be polite, hard-working, and kind, even when people weren't kind back. When cancer took her 3 years ago, all Anna had left were bills, an old pair of shoes, and the memory of her mother's soft laughter on Sunday mornings. Those shoes sat by the door, still wet from last night's rain. Their soles were worn thin, but the sight of them steadied her somehow. They reminded her of everything she'd survived: double shifts, unpaid rent, the emptiness of losing family. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of thought. It was a text from her landlord. "Rent's late again. I need it by Friday, or I'll have to list the unit." Anna's chest tightened. Friday. 4 days. She had $42 to her name. She pulled on her coat, the one with a missing button, and stepped outside. The cold hit her instantly. She walked the streets for hours, going from cafe to cafe, restaurant to restaurant, asking the same question. "Are you hiring?" Every time, the answer was some version of no. By afternoon, her feet ached and her hope was fraying. She stopped at a park bench to rest. Across the street, a restaurant sign caught her eye. The Golden Fork, now hiring. She hurried across, heart thumping. Inside, the manager looked her up and down before saying flatly, "We're full up. Sorry." "Please," she said, trying not to sound desperate. "I'll take any shift, any hours. I just need a chance." The man sighed. "I'd love to help, but we just brought in someone yesterday. Try again next month." She nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you anyway." As she stepped back outside, the grey sky opened up again, rain starting to fall in slow, heavy drops. She didn't even bother to run. Her hair plastered to her face, she laughed bitterly. "Figures," she muttered. She turned down a narrow street toward the subway, her shoes squelching with every step. That's when her gaze fell to her coat pocket, and she remembered the card. Edward Collins Group. She pulled it out, examining it under the streetlight. The paper felt expensive, embossed with gold lettering. There was no title, no office number, just a phone and an address in Midtown Manhattan. Her instincts told her it was ridiculous. Men like that didn't just hand out opportunities to waitresses with wet shoes. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe he was just being kind. But something about his calm eyes the night before, how he'd looked at her, not with pity but with understanding, stuck with her. She dialed the number before she could talk herself out of it. 1 ring. 2. Then a voice, smooth, deep, and unmistakably the same. "Anna Parker," he said, as if he'd been expecting her. "I was wondering when you'd call." She froze. "How did you—" He chuckled softly. "Come to the address on the card tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring those shoes." The line went dead. Anna stared at her phone, her heart pounding. The rain soaked through her coat, but she barely noticed. For the first time since last night, the crushing humiliation began to fade, replaced by something else. Something like hope. The next morning, Anna stood at the base of a skyscraper that looked like it touched the clouds. The plaque near the revolving door gleamed in the morning sun. Edward Collins Group. The glass walls reflected the city back at her. People rushing, horns blaring, 1,000 dreams colliding. She tightened her grip on her worn purse. Inside it were the same old shoes, carefully wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. Her reflection in the glass looked out of place. Cheap coat, tired eyes, and a courage she wasn't sure she actually had. The security guard at the entrance raised an eyebrow. "Appointment?" "I think so," she said, fumbling with the card. "Edward Collins told me to come at 9. He checked a list, then nodded. "Top floor. You'll need a visitor badge." As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. "Don't faint. Don't ramble. Don't screw this up," she whispered. The elevator rose silently, floor after floor, until the doors opened to a space that didn't feel like an office. It felt like another world. The reception area was flooded with light from a panoramic view of Manhattan. White marble floors gleamed beneath her feet. Every corner spoke of wealth, quiet, confident, untouchable. A woman in a sleek grey suit approached. "Miss Parker?" Anna nodded, trying not to sound nervous. "Yes. Mr. Collins will see you now." The woman led her through glass doors into an enormous office that overlooked the skyline. Behind a mahogany desk sat Edward Collins, the man from last night. He wasn't just rich, he radiated something rarer, calm authority. His silver hair caught the morning light like frost, and his eyes carried the steady patience of someone who'd seen everything and still believed in people. "Good morning, Anna," he said. "You made it." She tried to smile. "I almost didn't. Thought this might be a mistake." "Most opportunities start that way," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. She sat gingerly, feeling out of place against the soft leather chair. "I don't understand why you asked me here." He leaned forward. "Last night, I saw two things in that restaurant. A man who has everything but character, and a woman who has nothing but dignity. I prefer the second." Her throat tightened. I just did my job." He smiled faintly. "No, you showed restraint. That's rarer than talent. Tell me, Anna, if you could change one thing about the world you came from, what would it be?" She hesitated. "The way people treat others when they think they're above them." He nodded slowly. "Good answer." He stood and walked toward a framed photograph on the wall, a younger Edward standing beside a much younger Richard Hale, shaking hands outside a restaurant. Anna's stomach flipped. "That's him." "Yes," Edward said quietly. "Once upon a time, Richard and I built Hale's Crown together. I funded it. He ran it. But greed changed him. He forgot who gave him his start." Anna blinked. "You worked with him?" "Until he decided he didn't need me," Edward said. "He bought me out, used my own designs, my recipes, my people, and turned them into a monument to his ego. I let him. People like that always fall eventually. The question is who catches what's left." He turned back to her. "And that's why you're here." Anna frowned. "Me? I don't understand." "You will," he said. "I'm opening a new project. I need someone who knows what real work feels like. Not privilege, not polish. Truth." "I'm not qualified," she said quickly. "I've never managed anything. I'm just—" "A survivor," he interrupted gently. "That's all I need right now." She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He slid a folder across the desk. "Come tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. You'll shadow my team for a week. After that, we'll see if you're ready." She opened the folder and froze. The letterhead read, "Hale's Crown, Internal Audit and Transition Plan." Her pulse quickened. "You're going after him." Edward's smile was warm, deliberate. "No, Miss Parker. I'm giving him exactly what he gave me. A lesson in humility." Anna closed the folder carefully. For the first time in years, she felt something electric stirring beneath her fear. She whispered, almost to herself, "Then maybe it's time he remembered who he really is." Edward nodded. "And maybe it's time you remember who you are." The city stretched out beneath them, glittering and endless. And somewhere far below, Richard Hale had no idea that his fall had already begun. By the time Friday rolled around, Anna could barely breathe from nerves. She stood in front of the mirror of her tiny bathroom, smoothing the wrinkles from her borrowed blazer. The reflection staring back at her looked nothing like the girl who'd been humiliated a week ago. Her hair was neatly tied, her shoulders squared, but her eyes, those still carried the memory of that night, sharp and burning. She took one last look at the old shoes sitting by the door. "Not today," she whispered. She slipped into plain black heels Edward's assistant had sent her, but before leaving, she touched the worn leather gently. "You'll come with me again, soon." The car Edward arranged picked her up exactly at 8. By 9, they were pulling up in front of Hale's Crown. The same golden logo gleamed above the door, just as cruelly perfect as she remembered. Her stomach twisted. Edward stepped out beside her, dressed in his usual calm authority. "Ready?" he asked. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Good," he said, offering a faint smile. People who are sure are usually the ones who mess up everything. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with the quiet precision of morning prep. Waiters moved like clockwork. Chefs shouted orders, and the scent of roasted coffee mingled with butter and ambition. The manager, a thin man with a clipboard, approached immediately. "Mr. Collins, welcome. We weren't expecting you until next week." "Surprises keep things honest," Edward said lightly. "This is Anna Parker. She'll be joining us for the internal review." The manager froze. His eyes flicked to Anna, then away, pretending not to recognize her. But the faint twitch of his jaw betrayed him. "Of course," he said quickly. I'll make sure she's briefed." Anna followed him through the gleaming dining room. Every polished surface felt like a mirror, reflecting her past humiliation. She could almost hear Richard's voice, echoing, "You're fired, right here, right now." In the kitchen, the familiar chaos surrounded her. Steam, sizzling pans, the clang of metal. It was the sound of her old life. She took a deep breath, grounding herself. "You can start by reviewing staff schedules and training logs," the manager muttered, dropping a binder on the counter. "Mr. Hale will want everything spotless." Anna nodded. "Of course." She flipped through the pages, scanning numbers, wages, invoices. Something didn't add up. Several paychecks were cut short, overtime hours vanished, tips unrecorded. It wasn't incompetence. It was theft. Quiet, calculated theft. By noon, Edward joined her in the back office. "You've been busy," he said, noticing the open files. "I think your partner's been stealing from his own staff," she said, her voice steady. "He's cutting their pay, hiding it under inventory. Edward's eyes narrowed slightly, though his tone stayed calm. "That's exactly what I expected you to find. Richard's empire is built on exploitation, not excellence. Now we prove it." Before Anna could respond, the door swung open. Richard Hale himself stepped in. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. His eyes widened, then narrowed into disbelief. "You!" he hissed. "What the hell is this?" Anna's throat tightened, but she met his gaze. "Hello, Mr. Hale." Edward stepped forward smoothly. "Richard, meet my new consultant. She'll be assisting with your audit." Richard turned on him, his face reddening. "You brought her here? After the stunt she pulled? She's a nobody." Edward's voice didn't waver. "She's the reason I'm investing in this chain again. I suggest you treat her with the respect you didn't before." The room seemed to shrink around them. Richard glared at Anna, his jaw tight. "You think you can walk back in here and play businesswoman? I built this place." She held his gaze, calm and unflinching. "Then you should remember how to treat the people who keep it standing." For a long, tense second, he said nothing. Then he laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You'll regret this, both of you." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Anna exhaled shakily. "That went well," she murmured. Edward chuckled. "You handled him better than I ever did." She smiled faintly. "He hasn't seen anything yet." Outside, through the glass walls, the afternoon sun hit the golden letters of Hale's Crown. They glimmered like a challenge, waiting to be answered. And for the first time, Anna didn't feel small in that world anymore. She felt ready to claim it. Saturday night arrived like a thunderstorm waiting to break. Hale's Crown was packed, politicians, investors, and socialites filling every table. The hum of conversation and the glint of champagne masked the tension brewing beneath the surface. Anna stood quietly near the back, clutching her clipboard, trying to blend in. Edward had told her to observe, not interfere. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Richard Hale was in his element. His laughter echoed across the dining room, too loud, too polished. Every gesture screamed arrogance. He strutted from table to table like a king inspecting his court, oblivious to the growing storm his empire was hiding. At 8:47 p.m., disaster struck. One of the waiters tripped near the main table, sending a tray of red wine tumbling across the white tablecloth right in front of the investors from Paris. The room froze. The young waiter, barely 20, turned ghost white. Richard's face darkened instantly. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted. Hale? The music died. Conversations stopped. "You clumsy idiot!" the waiter stammered. "Sir, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean—" "Of course you didn't mean it," Richard barked. "That's what people like you always say. You're useless." Anna's stomach twisted. She saw herself in that boy, standing under the same chandeliers, with the same humiliation burning her skin. "Richard," Edward said quietly from across the room. "It's just an accident." But Richard ignored him. He ripped the towel from the boy's hands and tossed it aside. "Do you have any idea how much this table costs? How much I pay you to not screw up one simple job?" The boy's voice cracked. "Sir, please, you're fired," Richard snapped. "Get out!" The waiter stood, frozen, shaking. Anna couldn't stay silent. She stepped forward. "Mr. Hale, that's enough." Every head turned. The air in the room thickened. Richard turned slowly, recognizing her voice. His lips curled into a cruel smirk. "You again," he said. "What is it with you and people who don't belong here?" Anna took a steady breath. "He made a mistake. It happens. You don't have to humiliate him in front of everyone." He laughed. "Oh, I see what this is. The ex-waitress is here to teach me manners." "Someone has to," she said softly. The investors watched, whispering. Edward stayed silent, his eyes unreadable. Richard's tone sharpened. "You think this is your moment, don't you? You think because Collins is backing you, you can walk in here and tell me how to run my business?" "I think," Anna replied, "you forgot what business really is. It's not just profit and prestige, it's people." He sneered. "You're just like her. My ex-partner thought compassion was currency too. Look where that got him." Edward finally spoke, his voice cool. "It got me right here, Richard, watching you implode in front of your investors." A murmur rippled through the crowd. One of the guests, a French investor with a thick accent, leaned forward. "Is this how you treat your staff, Mr. Hale?" Richard's composure cracked. "This is none of your business." "Oh, but it is," the investor said dryly. "We don't fund tyrants." Panic flashed across Richard's face. He turned back to Anna, fury boiling behind his eyes. "You set this up," he spat. "You and your little savior act. You think anyone here cares about your shoes and sob stories?" Anna met his gaze, calm and unflinching. "They care about decency, Richard. Something you traded away a long time ago." For a long moment, silence held the room hostage. Then the investors began standing, murmuring to their aides, collecting their things. The deal was collapsing right in front of him. Richard lunged forward a step, his voice breaking. "Wait, please, this is a misunderstanding." But no one stopped. No one even looked back. The young waiter, still shaking, turned to Anna and whispered, "Thank you." She smiled faintly. "Go home, kid. Tomorrow will be better." As the crowd dispersed, Richard stood in the center of the room. surrounded by spilled wine and shattered pride. Edward approached him quietly. "You know," he said, "humiliation feels different when the spotlight's on you." Richard didn't respond. His empire, his confidence, his mask, it all began to crack. Anna turned away, her heart pounding. The man who once broke her spirit had just broken himself, and he didn't even know it yet. The restaurant was a war zone once the guests were gone. Crystal glasses, half full of abandoned champagne, glimmered like casualties under the low light. Staff whispered nervously, unsure whether to clean up or stay out of the blast radius. In the middle of it all stood Richard Hale, his tuxedo jacket undone, his pride bleeding out faster than the spilled wine on the carpet. Edward Collins watched quietly from the bar, hands folded. Beside him, Anna stayed still, the storm in her chest hidden behind a calm expression. Richard finally turned toward them. His face was pale, jaw tight, eyes rimmed with disbelief. "You think this is funny, don't you?" he snapped. "You planned this, both of you." Edward's voice was calm. "You planned it, Richard. You just didn't realize you've been rehearsing your downfall for years." Richard's laugh was bitter. "Spare me the philosophy. You've wanted this since the day I outgrew you." Edward tilted his head. "You didn't outgrow me. You outgrew decency." The silence that followed was suffocating. Anna looked around at the terrified wait staff, their eyes darting like trapped birds. She stepped forward. "They shouldn't have to see this," she said quietly. "You've embarrassed enough people for one night." Richard's gaze locked on her. "And you," he hissed, "the little charity case who thinks she's my moral compass. You wouldn't last a day in my shoes." Anna's voice was steady. "Funny, you fired me for mine." A few of the servers snorted softly before covering their mouths. Richard's glare shut them down instantly. He leaned closer to Anna, his breath sharp with whiskey. "You think you've won something here? You're a prop in his little redemption play." Edward straightened. "Careful, Richard." Richard ignored him. "She's nothing. She'll always be nothing." That hit harder than she wanted to admit, but Anna didn't flinch. "Maybe," she said, "but at least I can look in the mirror and not hate the person staring back." Richard's jaw twitched. "You think you're better than me?" "No," she said softly. "I think I remember what better looks like." The air seemed to thicken with tension. Then Edward stepped between them. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This isn't about winning. It's about consequence." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a document, placing it on the table between them. "Tomorrow morning, this will be filed with the board. Full audit, payroll manipulation, tax discrepancies, falsified inventory. You've been sloppy, Richard." Richard's face drained of color. "You wouldn't." "I already did," Edward said. Richard lunged for the papers, but Edward's assistant appeared from the shadows, blocking him with quiet authority. For a long second, Richard just stood there, trembling with rage. Then he looked at Anna again, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "You don't understand. I built this place. Everything in this room exists because of me." Anna's expression softened, not out of pity, but recognition. "Then you should have protected it better." He shook his head. "You think destroying me will fix anything?" She met his eyes. "It's not about destroying you. It's about ending what you've become." He stared at her, searching for some crack of doubt. There wasn't one. The realization hit him like a punch. The girl he'd once humiliated had become the mirror he couldn't bear to face. Richard turned to Edward, voice trembling. "You think she's your savior? You're both fools. This place dies without me." Edward smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time it lived without you." Richard stood frozen for a beat, then brushed past them and stormed out, the heavy doors slamming behind him. For a long moment, the restaurant was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. The staff slowly resumed cleaning, their movements cautious but lighter somehow, as if a weight had lifted. Anna exhaled, her hands shaking slightly. "That was brutal," she whispered. Edward placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Necessary." She looked around the grand dining room, once her prison, now a battlefield she'd survived. "Do you think he'll fight back?" she asked. Edward's eyes were distant. "Men like Richard always do. But this time, we'll be ready." The night air outside was sharp and cool when they stepped out. The golden sign above the door glowed faintly, flickering at the edges like a crown beginning to crack. And for the first time, Anna wasn't the one walking away in shame. She was walking toward the dawn of something bigger. Justice. The following Monday, Anna sat across from Edward Collins in his office, sunlight pouring across the polished wood like liquid gold. The skyline stretched behind him, distant and untouchable, but his attention was on her alone. He looked calm, but there was something in his eyes, a shadow, maybe guilt, maybe resolve. "You did well," he said simply. Anna exhaled, a mix of pride and exhaustion. It didn't feel like winning. It felt heavy. He nodded. Truth usually does, especially when it's been buried for too long. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been haunting her since the night of the confrontation. "Why me, Mr. Collins? Out of everyone you could have chosen, why pick me?" He smiled faintly. "Because you remind me of someone I used to be before I became who I am." That answer didn't satisfy her, but his tone didn't invite more questions. He poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one across the desk. "Tell me something, Anna," he said, leaning back. "When you saw him humiliate that boy, what did you feel?" She thought for a long moment. Anger. But not just for him. For me. For everyone who's ever been made to feel small, just to make someone else look powerful. He studied her face, then nodded as if confirming a theory. "Good. That's empathy. That's leadership. It's why I'm giving you something most people never get, a chance to rebuild what someone else ruined." Her heart skipped. Rebuild what? He turned a folder toward her. Inside was a blueprint for a new restaurant. Different name, different design, but familiar in its soul. The header read, "The Crown Reborn." "You're giving me a restaurant?" she asked, stunned. "I'm giving you responsibility," he corrected. "Ownership comes later, when you prove you can make it thrive." She shook her head slowly. "I don't have money. I don't have investors. I barely have confidence." He smiled. "You have me. And more importantly, you have integrity. That's rarer than cash." Silence hung between them, heavy and electric. "Why do I get the feeling this is more than business?" she asked finally. Edward's expression shifted, softening. "Because it is." He rose and walked to the window, his reflection framed by the city below. "Richard and I started Hale's Crown together, 25 years ago. 2 men from nothing. Him with ambition, me with patience. For a while it worked, until he learned the wrong lesson." Anna listened quietly, sensing he'd never told this story before. He thought success was about dominance, about being feared. He forgot that leadership is service. I let him take the company because I thought failure would teach him humility. Edward turned, his voice lower now. "It didn't." "So this, all of this," Anna said slowly, "is about redemption." "For him," Edward said, "and for me." He paused. "But maybe also for you." She frowned. "Me?" "You've spent years letting other people define your worth," he said. "Your mother worked herself into the ground, so you could stand where she never could. Now it's your turn to show the world what that kind of strength looks like." Her throat tightened. "You sound like you knew her." "I didn't," he said gently. "But I know her daughter." Anna looked down at the folder again, tracing the embossed letters with her fingertips. The Crown Reborn. It sounded impossible, and yet somehow it felt right. "What if I fail?" she whispered. Edward smiled. "Then you learn. Failure isn't the opposite of success, Anna. It's the blueprint for it. She laughed softly. You sound like a quote from a fortune cookie. He grinned. You'll appreciate it later. When she stood to leave, he said one last thing. Tomorrow, we meet with the board. They'll try to push you out, but don't let them. You've earned your place at that table. She nodded. And Richard? Edward's smile vanished. He'll be there too. He always shows up when he's about to lose something. As she left his office, the weight of what lay ahead pressed on her chest, but beneath it, something stronger pulsed. Determination. Outside, the city buzzed with its endless rhythm, and Anna whispered to herself, let's see what they do when the girl with the old shoes walks back into the boardroom. Because this time, she wasn't the waitress. She was the storm. The next morning came with the kind of nervous energy that felt electric under Anna's skin. She stood outside the boardroom of Edward Collins' group, clutching the same folder that had kept her awake all night. The Crown Reborn. Through the glass doors, she could see them already gathered, men in sharp suits, women with eyes like polished steel, and at the head of the table, Richard Hale. Her pulse skipped. He was composed again, the perfect picture of a man who'd convinced himself last week never happened. His smile was thin, professional, and venomous. Edward leaned toward her as they waited for the meeting to begin. Remember what I told you, he murmured. You don't have to outshout them. Just outlast them. She nodded, gripping the folder tighter. Right. Outlast. The doors opened. Every head turned as they entered. The room was sleek, cold, everything designed to intimidate. Richard's smile widened. Well, well, the prodigy returns. Did you come to take more notes, or are you here to play businesswoman again? Anna forced a calm smile. Just here to listen. For now. He chuckled. Good. Then listen closely. Edward took his seat at the head of the table, ignoring Richard's posturing. Let's begin, he said. We're here to discuss the acquisition of Hale's Crown and the proposal for its restructuring. A board member cleared his throat. Mr. Collins, with all due respect, the chain is profitable. Why replace management? Edward glanced at Anna. Because profit isn't the same as progress. Richard leaned back in his chair, feigning amusement. Progress? Is that what you call this charity experiment? He gestured at Anna. She's a waitress, not a strategist. I'm running restaurants, not summer camps. Anna's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. Maybe that's the problem, she said softly. The room fell silent. Richard arched an eyebrow. I'm sorry. What was that? She straightened. Maybe that's why you're sitting here defending yourself instead of celebrating growth. You forgot that restaurants aren't built on marble floors. They're built on people. A few board members exchanged surprised looks. Edward smiled faintly, letting her speak. Richard's tone sharpened. You think you can lecture me on business? No, she said calmly. But I can tell you what it feels like to work for someone who thinks they're untouchable. You fired me because of my shoes. You embarrassed a kid in front of investors. You've forgotten what dignity looks like. He slammed his hand on the table. You don't know what it takes to keep an empire standing. She met his fury with quiet resolve. Maybe not. But I know what it looks like when one starts to fall. The boardroom froze again, that stillness before the glass shatters. Edward finally broke it. Enough. You're right about one thing, Richard. This isn't charity. It's accountability. He turned to the board. You all have the financials. Payroll manipulation, vendor fraud, falsified invoices. This company isn't as clean as it looks, which means we can either rebuild with honesty or collapse under deceit. Murmurs rippled around the table. One of the senior members leaned forward. And you're proposing what, exactly? Edward smiled and gestured toward Anna. We rebuild, from the ground up, with her leading the pilot project, the Crown Reborn. Richard stared, speechless. Then he laughed. You can't be serious. You're giving my brand to her? Edward's eyes hardened. Your brand? No, Richard. It was never yours. It was ours. and you sold your share of integrity a long time ago." Anna's hands trembled as every gaze turned to her. One of the board members asked, "Do you really believe you can handle this, Miss Parker?" She took a breath. "No," she said honestly, "but I'll learn, and I'll make sure everyone who walks through those doors, whether they're a guest or an employee, feels like they matter. That's the foundation you've all been missing." Silence. Then one by one, heads began to nod. Edward's voice broke through like final punctuation. "All in favor of moving forward with the Crown Reborn?" Hands rose around the table, even the skeptical ones. Richard's didn't. He sat frozen, fury and disbelief warring behind his eyes. Edward stood, closing the folder in front of him. Motion passed. Anna exhaled slowly, her hands still trembling. As they left the room, Richard called after her. "You're making a mistake, girl. You're walking into something you can't control." She turned back, calm and steady. "Maybe, but at least I'm walking forward." And as the door closed behind her, for the first time, the empire that once owned her fate began to shift under her feet. 2 weeks later, Anna stood once again at the front doors of Hale's Crown. The same golden emblem gleamed above the entrance, but this time the sight didn't make her shrink. It made her stand taller. The wind tugged at her coat, the city buzzing around her like white noise. She wasn't the invisible waitress anymore. She was the woman walking back into the fire with her head held high. The staff didn't recognize her at first. Her hair was neatly pinned, her clothes crisp, her posture confident. The girl who once trembled under Richard Hale's glare was gone. When she stepped inside, the familiar scent of espresso and seared steak hit her like déjà vu. It was the same restaurant, but to her it felt different, smaller, somehow. The hostess looked up from the podium. "Good afternoon. Do you have a reservation?" Anna smiled faintly. "You could say that. I'm here for the management meeting." The woman blinked. "You're with Mr. Hale's team." "I'm with the new one," Anna said simply. That caused a ripple. Within minutes, whispers spread through the kitchen and dining floor. The girl who got fired is back. The head waiter nearly dropped his tray when he saw her. "Anna? You... What? How?" She smiled softly. "Long story. Let's just say I'm not serving tables today." He looked both shocked and proud. About time someone stood up to him. Before she could respond, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "What is going on here?" Richard Hale appeared from his office, his expression darkening as soon as he saw her. "You have got to be kidding me." "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she said evenly. He looked around at the watching staff. "You all have work to do," he barked, and they scattered like startled birds. Then, lowering his voice, he hissed, "You think dressing up makes you something more than a charity case?" "I don't think it," she replied calmly. "I know it. I'm here representing Mr. Collins and the board. Effective today, I'll be shadowing operations for the restructuring phase." Richard gave a humorless laugh. "You mean spying? Don't flatter yourself." "Call it what you want," she said, "but I'll be here every day, observing, learning, fixing." His jaw tightened. "You don't belong here." She met his gaze squarely. "That's funny. I used to believe you." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "You're playing a dangerous game, Anna. You think you understand business because Collins pats you on the head? You're just a pawn. When this falls apart, and it will, you'll be the one they blame." She didn't flinch. "Then I'll take that risk. Because I'd rather fail doing something right than succeed doing what you did." He glared at her, breathing hard, but before he could respond, Edward's assistant appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hale, the auditors are ready for the walkthrough." Richard straightened instantly, his mask snapping back into place. "Fine," he said, his tone clipped. He turned to Anna. "Stay out of my way." "Gladly," she said. As the day unfolded, Anna followed the audit team through every corner of the restaurant. She noted details no one else did. The overstocked wine cellar, The inconsistent invoices, the tired eyes of overworked staff. Every piece of evidence built the case that the empire Richard Hale had built was rotting from the inside. By afternoon, she slipped into the break room. Some of the staff avoided her. Others nodded respectfully. The young waiter she'd defended earlier approached shyly. "You really came back," he said. "Guess I did." "You're brave," he said. She smiled. "No, just done being afraid." When she stepped out to the main floor again, the sun had dipped low, the restaurant glowing in amber light. For a brief moment, she saw herself reflected in the mirrored wall. Not the waitress, not the victim, but a woman reclaiming her story. Behind her, Richard watched from his office window, his expression unreadable. He didn't realize she could see his reflection too. He was afraid. And deep down, Anna knew. His fear meant the balance of power had already begun to shift. It was nearly midnight when Anna sat alone in the dim back office of Hale's Crown. The glow from the computer screen painted her face pale blue. Stacks of ledgers, invoices, and payroll logs surrounded her like the remains of a collapsed empire. Her eyes burned from hours of reading, but she couldn't stop. The deeper she looked, the more rotten the truth became. She scrolled through spreadsheets that didn't add up. Transactions rerouted to shell accounts, vendor fees with no real vendors, missing employee bonuses, millions siphoned quietly over the years. Richard hadn't just been arrogant, he'd been stealing from his own company. Anna leaned back in the chair, rubbing her temples. "How long has this been going on?" she whispered. A knock startled her. Edward stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've been at this for hours," he said. "Drink before you fall over." She smiled faintly. "You knew, didn't you?" He set the cup beside her. "I suspected. But suspicions don't matter in business. Proof does." She turned the screen toward him. "Then we have proof. Payroll fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement. He's been draining his own empire to fund personal projects. Private jets, hidden properties, hush money. It's all here." Edward nodded slowly, studying her face. "You understand what happens next, don't you?" She swallowed. "The board has to see this." "Yes," he said. "But when they do, Richard will fight like a cornered animal. He'll drag you down with him if he can." She met his gaze. "Let him try." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. The girl he'd met in the rain, now sitting in the lion's den with fire in her eyes. "You remind me of myself," he said quietly. "The younger version, before the money changed everything." "Did it change you?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "Money doesn't change people, Anna. It reveals who they really are." The silence stretched. Outside, the city glowed with its endless pulse of greed and ambition. Anna turned back to the monitor. "You know what's strange? When he fired me, I thought that was the worst day of my life. But now, I think it was the beginning of something I was meant to do." Edward smiled softly. "Pain has a way of waking us up." Suddenly, the office door swung open. Richard Hale stood in the doorway, his face shadowed, his voice low and venomous. "I was wondering when the rats would start digging." Anna's blood ran cold, but she didn't move. "Working late?" she said evenly. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "Cute. You think you're clever because you found some files?" "They're not just files, Richard. They're evidence." He laughed bitterly. "You think the board will believe you? You're a waitress with a new title. I'm the name on the building." Edward stepped forward. "Not for long." Richard glared at him. "You always loved playing God, didn't you? Saving strays, pretending to be noble." "You don't fool me, Edward. You're just as ruthless. You're just better at hiding it." Edward's tone stayed calm. "If I were hiding it, you'd already be gone." The 2 men stared at each other, decades of betrayal and resentment simmering in the air. Anna broke the tension. "You built this place on lies, Mr. Hale, and it's about to crumble." He turned to her, eyes blazing. "You think you're saving this company? You're burning it down." "Maybe," she said, "but at least the ashes will be honest." He stepped closer, his voice almost a growl. "Careful, Anna. You're playing in a world where people like me don't lose." She didn't blink. "Then I guess you've forgotten what losing feels like." For a moment, he just stared at her. Truly stared. And something flickered in his expression. Not anger this time. Fear. He turned to leave but paused in the doorway. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "Both of you." The door slammed shut behind him. Edward let out a long breath. "He's scared," he said. Anna looked at the glowing monitor, the numbers that told a story greed couldn't hide. He should be. Because the truth was no longer buried, and tomorrow the whole world would see it. The following week, tension hung over Hale's crown like a thundercloud that refused to break. Every conversation stopped when Anna walked by. Every look she received carried a question. What's going to happen now? She'd turned the evidence over to Edward, who was preparing to present it to the board, but something in her gut felt off, a quiet warning that refused to fade. Richard Hale was too proud, too cunning to sit back and wait for his empire to collapse. She was right. Late Tuesday afternoon, Anna arrived to find chaos brewing. Staff huddled near the kitchen, whispering. The young waiter she'd defended before rushed up to her. "You need to see this," he said, eyes wide. In the manager's office, Richard's assistant stood behind the desk, a smirk playing on her lips. On the computer screen was an email, fake invoices, falsified transactions, all under Anna's name. Her stomach dropped. "What is this?" The assistant shrugged. "Funny thing, Miss Parker. The audit found new irregularities this morning. Your credentials were used to authorize payments to a non-existent supplier." "That's impossible," Anna said. "I haven't touched the system since Friday." Richard chose that moment to walk in, hands clasped behind his back, his tone oozing false sympathy. Now, let's not get defensive. Mistakes happen. But stealing from a company you're supposed to help? That's a new low, even for you." "You set me up," she said, fury rising. He smiled faintly. "Or maybe you just got greedy. It happens. The poor always do." The words hit her like a slap. She glanced around the room. Employees stood frozen, uncertain who to believe. Edward entered a moment later, his calm presence cutting through the noise. "What's going on?" Richard gestured toward the screen. "Your golden girl's been busy. I warned you she wasn't as innocent as she looked." Edward's gaze flicked to Anna. "Is it true?" "No," she said firmly. "Those files are fake." He's trying to bury the evidence we found." Richard laughed. "How convenient. The accused claiming innocence. How original." Edward stepped forward, his tone icy. "If you fabricated this, Richard, you'll answer for it." Richard raised an eyebrow. "You think the board will side with her over me? She's a waitress you plucked off the street. I'm the man who built this brand." Anna met his eyes. "You built nothing but a mirror for your own ego." He leaned in close enough that only she could hear him. "You really should have stayed quiet, sweetheart. You don't know how this world works." She didn't flinch. "Neither do you. Not anymore." Edward turned to his assistant. "Have the IT department pull the metadata from those documents. I want timestamps, IP logs, the works." The assistant nodded and hurried out. Richard scoffed. "You'll waste time chasing ghosts. But sure, investigate. Meanwhile, my lawyers will be very interested in the fact that your new executive has been laundering money." Anna's fists clenched. "You're unbelievable." "No," Richard said smoothly. "I'm untouchable." Edward's voice dropped. "Not for long." The rest of the day crawled by in silence. Anna sat at her desk, her mind spinning. Doubt crept in like poison. What if the board didn't believe her? What if this was how Richard won? By twisting the truth until it strangled her. As the sun set, Edward's assistant returned, a thin folder in her hands. "We finished the analysis," she said. "The login came from Mr. Hale's office. The files were created using his credentials." Edward took the folder, his jaw tightening. So much for untouchable. When Richard saw them approaching his office, he was already pouring a drink. "Come to apologize?" he said without looking up. "No," Anna said quietly. "We came to end this." He glanced up, and for the first time, something flickered in his expression. Doubt. Edward placed the folder on his desk. "You're done, Richard. Tomorrow morning, the board will have everything. The fraud, the manipulation, the setup, all of it." Richard's hand trembled slightly as he set down his glass. "You think they'll believe you over me?" Edward smiled coldly. "No. They'll believe your own files." Anna met his eyes, steady and calm. "You taught me something, Mr. Hale. You said people like you don't lose. You were wrong." The color drained from his face. As they turned to leave, his voice cracked behind them. "You can't take what's mine." Anna stopped at the door, glancing back just once. "It stopped being yours the moment you forgot what it meant to earn it." And for the first time, Richard Hale looked smaller than the girl he once called nothing. The next morning, the boardroom at Edward Collins' group felt like a courtroom waiting for its verdict. 12 executives sat around a long glass table, their faces unreadable. At the head sat Edward, silent and composed. To his right, Anna, steady, but pale. Across from her, Richard Hale, freshly shaven, suit immaculate, smile razor-sharp. He looked like a man rehearsing confidence because he'd run out of power. Edward opened the meeting. "We're here to review the audit findings for Hale's Crown." Richard leaned back. "Before we start, I'd like to say something. This," he gestured to Anna, "has gone far enough. I've been accused of fraud by a woman with no background in finance, no management experience, and no credibility." Anna stayed quiet, her hands folded on the table. He continued, voice smooth as silk. "I've dedicated 20 years to this company, and now I'm being framed by the same people who owe their success to me. It's absurd." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. The room was thick with unease. Edward finally spoke. "Richard, we've given you every chance to defend yourself. If you have proof that contradicts the audit, now's the time." Richard's smirk didn't falter. "Gladly." He pulled out a sleek black folder and slid it across the table. "Here's my own report, verified by my accountants. You'll see everything matches perfectly." One of the board members began leafing through the papers. "This looks clean," she murmured. Anna's stomach tightened. She glanced at Edward, but he motioned for patience. Richard smiled wider. "See? Numbers don't lie." Edward nodded slowly. "No, they don't. But people do." He turned to his assistant. "Would you bring in our tech team, please?" The door opened. 2 IT specialists entered, carrying laptops. They connected them to the projector and displayed a list of digital records on the screen. Edward stood. "We traced the login data from the documents Mr. Hale submitted last night. Turns out these files were created using his own credentials, hours after the fraud report was submitted. Time-stamped, IP logged, and verified." The color drained from Richard's face. "That's ridiculous. Someone could have—" Anna interrupted, calm but firm. "Hacked your personal account? From your office computer? At 2 a.m? Laughter rippled softly around the room. Richard's voice rose. "This is a setup." Edward didn't blink. "No, Richard. This is accountability. The only person who framed you was you." Silence filled the room, heavy and final. One of the senior board members spoke, her tone measured but cold. "Mr. Hale, given this evidence, the board moves to suspend your position effective immediately, pending legal review." Richard shot to his feet. "You can't do this! I made this company! Without me, it's nothing!" Edward met his gaze. "Then maybe it's time to see what it becomes without you." Security entered quietly. Richard froze, the weight of defeat finally settling on his shoulders. His eyes flicked to Anna, fury mixing with disbelief. "You think you've won something here? You'll see how cruel this world gets when you're the one in charge." Anna didn't rise to it. She simply said, "I already have, but I still choose to be better." He stared at her for one long, trembling second before security escorted him out. When the door shut behind him, the boardroom exhaled as if the air had finally turned breathable again. Edward sat back down, his voice softer now. "The motion stands. Effective immediately, Anna Parker will oversee the restructuring and relaunch of Hale's Crown under new ownership." A stunned hush followed. Anna blinked, unsure she'd heard right. "Me?" Edward nodded. "You earned it." Applause spread slowly around the table, cautious but genuine. She felt her throat tighten. "I don't even know what to say." "Say you'll make it right," Edward replied. Anna took a deep breath. "Then that's what I'll do." Through the glass wall behind them, the city stretched out in endless silver light. It felt poetic. The empire built on cruelty would now be rebuilt by compassion. And for the first time, the crown didn't belong to the man who demanded it. It belonged to the woman who deserved it. By the end of that week, the story was everywhere. Headlines blared across news sites and business channels. "Celebrity restaurateur Richard Hale under investigation for fraud. Hale's Crown founder suspended amid scandal." The internet devoured the drama. Video clips from the night of his outburst went viral. Tweets poured in, some mocking, some outraged, many cheering for the waitress who stood up to her billionaire boss. Anna never expected fame, and she didn't want it. But she couldn't ignore what it symbolized. For the first time, people were talking about integrity instead of influence. In Edward's office, she watched the coverage on a muted TV while he read a stack of reports. "This feels surreal," she admitted. "A week ago, I was serving coffee. Now I'm apparently the face of corporate justice." Edward smirked. "The world loves a good redemption story. They just forget that it costs something." She looked at him. "You mean him or me?" "Both," he said simply. Outside the window, reporters camped near the building, cameras flashing every few minutes. Anna sighed. "Do you think he'll fight back?" Edward leaned back in his chair. "Men like Richard always do. But when the truth becomes public record, there's only so much fighting left." The phone buzzed. His assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Collins, you should see this." On the screen, a live broadcast showed Richard Hale leaving the courthouse, surrounded by microphones. His face was pale, eyes hollow. "I've been betrayed," he told reporters, his voice cracking between arrogance and desperation. "This company was my life. I'll prove my innocence. You'll see." Anna felt a flicker of something unexpected. Pity. "He's still pretending," she murmured. Edward's gaze softened. Denial is easier than regret. The following days were chaos. Investigators flooded the restaurant. Accountants combed through every ledger, and the board moved swiftly to erase the stain Richard left behind. Employees whispered, unsure what the future held. On Friday morning, Anna stood in the center of the empty dining room. The chandeliers still sparkled, but the energy had shifted. Gone was the tension, the fear, the invisible hierarchy. It felt lighter. Edward joined her quietly. "How does it feel, walking through without flinching?" She smiled faintly. "Like the ghosts finally left." He handed her a document. "The relaunch proposal. New name, new values. I want you to lead it publicly." She glanced down at the title. The Crown Reborn. "It's real," she said softly. "It's yours," he replied. Her eyes glistened. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with what broke you," Edward said. "Then build the opposite." As workers began removing the old signage, Anna helped take down the golden letters. Hale's Crown. The H fell with a soft metallic clang that echoed through the room. It felt symbolic, like closing a chapter that had been too long in writing. Reporters gathered outside again when the new name was unveiled. Cameras clicked, people cheered, and Anna found herself standing behind a podium she never imagined occupying. She took a breath and spoke from the heart. This place was once built on fear and pride. But fear doesn't create greatness. People do. From now on, every person who walks through these doors will be treated with the respect they deserve. The crowd erupted in applause. As the ceremony ended, one of the former servers approached her. "You did it," he said, eyes bright. "You actually did it." Anna smiled, glancing at the newly unveiled sign. Crown Reborn. "Not yet," she said. "We're just starting." That night, when she finally sat alone in her office, she thought about everything it took to get here. The humiliation, the sleepless nights, the fight to be heard. And she realized something. The fall of Richard Hale wasn't the real victory. The real victory was the rise that came after. The proof that even the smallest voice could rewrite the story. Because the crown wasn't about power anymore. It was about dignity. And she'd earned every piece of it. The morning sun spilled over the glass windows of Crown Reborn, painting the dining room in gold. The air smelled of fresh coffee, baked bread, and possibility. For the first time, the place didn't feel intimidating. It felt alive. Workers laughed while arranging tables. The music was soft, hopeful. It was no longer a kingdom ruled by fear, but a home built on second chances. Anna stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, wearing a crisp white blouse and a small gold pin shaped like a crown. Her nameplate on the door read, "Anna Parker, Managing Director." She still wasn't used to it. A young hostess hurried over. "Ms. Parker, we finalized the lunch reservations, and the press is asking if you'll give a short statement before opening." Anna smiled. "Tell them I'll talk after the first shift ends. Right now, I'd rather focus on the people who actually make this place work." The hostess nodded and ran off. Anna took a slow look around. The old chandeliers remained, but the decor was warmer now. Earth tones, local art, softer lighting. The intimidating luxury had been replaced by quiet grace. Every detail whispered, "You belong here." Edward Collins entered from the kitchen, wiping flour from his sleeve. "You're early," he said, smiling. "Nervous?" "Only about everything," she admitted. He chuckled. "Good. That means you care." They walked through the dining room together. Staff greeted them with genuine smiles, not forced politeness. Edward stopped near the bar. "You did this," he said. "All of it." Anna shook her head. "No. We did this. You believed in me when no one else would." "Belief is cheap," Edward said. "You're the one who built something out of it." Just then, the doors opened, and a familiar figure stepped inside. The room seemed to go silent. Richard Hale. He looked different, thinner, older, the arrogance gone. His suit was plain, his tie slightly crooked. For a second, Anna thought it might be a hallucination. Edward's smile faded. "You shouldn't be here, Richard." Richard raised a hand. "I'm not here to cause trouble." His voice was quieter than she remembered. "I just wanted to see it. One last time." The staff froze, unsure whether to stay or leave. Anna nodded to them. "It's okay. Go on." When they were alone, she faced him across the polished floor. "You have a lot of nerve walking in here." He looked around, eyes tracing every new detail. "You changed it. It's beautiful." "Beauty wasn't the problem," she said flatly. "The way people were treated was." He nodded slowly. "You're right." His gaze dropped to the floor. "I was cruel. I thought power made me untouchable. Turns out it just makes the fall longer." Anna crossed her arms. "Why are you really here?" He hesitated. "To say I'm sorry. Not because it changes anything, but because you deserved better." The words hung in the air, fragile but sincere. For the first time, Anna didn't see the tyrant who'd humiliated her. She saw a broken man who'd built his own cage. She took a breath. Apology accepted. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. "I wouldn't ask you to," he said. He looked at the sign over the bar, Crown Reborn. "Fitting name?" She nodded. "It means something different now." He smiled faintly. "I hope it does." Richard turned to leave, but paused. "One more thing. If you ever need help, real help, not business advice, I'll be around. I have to start over too." Anna didn't respond. She just watched him go, his figure shrinking in the morning light. Edward came up beside her. "That was unexpected." "Yeah," she said softly, "but maybe necessary." He glanced at her. "How do you feel?" She smiled, "Like I just cleaned the last piece of glass from a broken window." Outside, the sign shimmered in the sunlight. Crown Reborn, owned by Anna Parker. And for the first time, she wasn't surviving someone else's empire. She was building her own. That night, Crown Reborn hosted its first private charity dinner. The restaurant glowed with warm light, soft jazz playing in the background. The city's elite filled the tables: investors, philanthropists, even a few skeptics who had once sided with Richard Hale. Everyone wanted to see if the girl who'd been fired for her shoes could actually run a restaurant. Anna stood near the main entrance, composed but anxious. She'd given 100 interviews, but this mattered more than any headline. This was the night she proved she belonged. Edward approached with his usual calm energy. "You've got this," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "I keep telling myself that," she replied. "Still feels like the floor could give out at any second." "That's leadership," he said with a grin. "No one ever feels ready. They just do it anyway." Before she could respond, the double doors opened again, and in walked Richard Hale. The crowd rippled with whispers. Cameras flashed. Anna froze. "He shouldn't be here," she muttered. Edward's jaw tightened. "He's not banned, just irrelevant." But Richard didn't look like a man seeking attention. His suit was plain, his shoulders heavy. He moved quietly through the room, ignoring the cameras. Finally, he stopped at the bar where Anna stood. "Evening," he said, voice low. "Mr. Hale," she said carefully. "Enjoying your first visit back?" He looked around, eyes softening. "You've done more in 3 weeks than I did in 3 years." She folded her arms. "Flattery doesn't fix what you broke." "I know," he said simply. "I didn't come here to talk business. I came to talk about something I haven't been good at." "What's that?" He hesitated, then looked her directly in the eye. "Accountability." For a moment, Anna didn't know how to respond. The guests nearby pretended not to watch, but everyone could feel the tension humming through the air. Richard continued. "I was subpoenaed this morning. The investigation's moving forward. My lawyers said I should deny everything. But," he exhaled shakily, "I'm tired of pretending. I signed the statement. I told them the truth." Anna blinked. "You confessed?" He nodded. "It won't change what I did to you, or to this place. But maybe it'll change what happens next." Edward stepped closer, his tone cautious. "Why now?" Richard glanced between them. "Because somewhere along the way, I started hating the man I'd become. Watching her." He nodded toward Anna. "Fix what I destroyed made me realize I still have a choice about how this story ends." The room had gone silent, the music softening to a whisper. Even the servers paused to listen. Anna's voice was quiet but steady. "You don't need my forgiveness to make things right." "I know," he said. "But I needed to say I'm sorry. Not just to you. To everyone who ever worked under me. I treated people like they were replaceable. You proved me wrong." For the first time, there was no bitterness in his tone, just weariness and truth. Edward nodded slowly. It takes courage to fall on your sword, Richard. Richard gave a half smile. Courage or desperation? Maybe both. He turned to Anna again. You won. Not because you humiliated me, but because you refused to become me. Her throat tightened. That's not what I wanted, she said softly. I just wanted to build something worth believing in. He looked at the glowing sign above the bar. Crown Reborn. Then you did. He turned to leave, but Anna stopped him. Wait. He paused. She extended her hand. Good luck, Richard. He stared at it for a moment before shaking it, his grip firm but trembling. You're a better person than I ever was, he said. As he walked out, a quiet applause began, slow, uncertain, then swelling into genuine respect. Edward leaned close and whispered, That was history, right there. Anna exhaled, a small smile tugging at her lips. No, she said. That was closure. The night carried on, music rising, laughter returning. But for Anna, the noise faded into something quieter, deeper. Peace. Because true victory wasn't about crushing someone. It was about standing tall without losing who you are. The following week, the city awoke to breaking news. Richard Hale pleads guilty to fraud and embezzlement, facing prison sentence. The story flooded every network. Photos of him leaving the courthouse in handcuffs were plastered across headlines. The man who once ruled an empire with a glass of champagne in one hand now looked small, human, defeated. Anna watched from her office at Crown Reborn. The TV's glow flickered across her face. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just sat there quietly, processing the sight of a man who had once made her cry in front of a crowd. Edward entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. It's over, he said softly. Anna nodded. It doesn't feel like victory. Just final. That's because you're not built for revenge, Edward said, handing her the cup. You're built for grace. She let out a small laugh. Grace doesn't pay the bills. No, he said, smiling faintly. But it builds empires that last. Outside, the restaurant buzzed with the usual morning chaos. Staff setting tables, chefs shouting orders, the aroma of fresh bread filling the air. Yet beneath it all, there was a calmness, as if the building itself had exhaled the last bit of poison Richard had left behind. Anna stood and walked to the window. You know what's strange? I thought I'd be angry forever. But now that it's done, I just feel sorry for him. Edward joined her at the window. Arrogance isolates people, Anna. By the time they realize it, there's no one left to save them. She turned to him. Do you think he'll ever change? Edward's eyes softened. Maybe. But sometimes, losing everything is the only thing that wakes a man up. Later that afternoon, Anna received an envelope delivered by courier. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter on lined paper. The handwriting was messy, rushed. Anna. By the time you read this, I'll be on my way to serve my sentence. The lawyers told me not to write, but this isn't about them. I just wanted you to know. Watching you rebuild what I destroyed taught me more about strength than all my years pretending to have it. You were right. People matter more than pride. Don't let anyone take that from you. Richard. She sat in silence for a long time, the letter trembling slightly in her hand. There were no excuses in his words, no manipulation, just regret. That night, she walked through the dining room after closing. The chandeliers reflected softly on the marble floors. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. She stopped near the table where it had all begun, where Richard had humiliated her in front of everyone for wearing those old shoes. She took a breath, slipped off her heels, and reached into her bag. Out came the same worn leather flats, scuffed, faded, familiar. She placed them neatly under the table. For closure, she whispered. Edward found her there a few minutes later. You okay? She smiled faintly. Yeah, Just leaving something behind. He looked at the shoes, then back at her. You sure you're ready to move on? I already did, she said. He nodded approvingly. Tomorrow's a new day. Press is already calling Crown Reborn one of the most inspiring turnarounds of the decade. Anna smiled. Then let's make sure we earn that title. As she turned off the last light, the restaurant glowed one final time before darkness settled. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware that one story had just closed while another quietly began. Somewhere downtown, Richard Hale sat in the back of a prison transport van, his cuffed hands resting on his knees. Through the small barred window, he saw the skyline, his skyline, fading behind him. He whispered to himself, "She won." And for the first time in his life, he said it without bitterness, only relief. Because true justice isn't about punishment. It's about awakening, and both of them finally had. 2 months passed. Spring had finally softened the city's hard edges. The air carried the scent of rain and blooming magnolias, and the city that once drowned Anna in noise now seemed to hum in rhythm with her heartbeat. Inside Crown Reborn, business was thriving. Every night, the restaurant filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of warmth that couldn't be faked. The press called it the comeback of the year. But for Anna, it wasn't about reputation. It was about redemption. One quiet morning, before the staff arrived, she walked through the dining room with a cup of coffee in hand. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, hitting the table where everything had once fallen apart. The ghost of that night, the humiliation, the sting of his words, had finally faded. She placed her coffee down and reached into her bag. Out came a small photograph. Her mother, laughing in a diner uniform, holding a tray just like she used to. Anna smiled softly. You'd probably think I'm crazy for staying in this business, she said out loud, but I think you'd also be proud. She set the photo on a nearby shelf, next to a vase of white lilies. Edward entered quietly from the kitchen, carrying 2 mugs. Talking to ghosts again? He teased gently. Only the good ones, she replied. He handed her a mug. You should take a day off. You've been living here. I like it here, she said. Feels like home. He looked around. That's because you turned it into one. They sat at a corner booth, sipping their coffee in comfortable silence. Finally, Edward said, I visited him last week. Anna looked up. Richard? He nodded. He's working in the prison kitchen. Can you believe that? Cooking for others. Said it was the first honest work he's done in years. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Really? Really? He asked about you. What did you tell him? That you're doing exactly what you said you would. Building something worth believing in. She smiled faintly. I hope he finds peace. Maybe that's what this was all for. Edward studied her for a moment. You're not angry anymore. She shook her head. Anger built the bridge, but forgiveness lets you cross it. Outside, a delivery truck honked, and the first few staff members began arriving. Anna stood, stretching. Time to get ready for another day. Edward watched her go, pride softening his usually composed expression. Later that evening, the restaurant was alive again. A couple celebrated an anniversary near the window. A group of students toasted their graduation, and at one table sat an elderly woman dining alone. Anna noticed her right away. The woman wore a simple cardigan, her hair silver, her eyes kind but tired. Anna approached. Good evening. Dining for one? The woman smiled. Yes, dear. My husband used to bring me here when it was still called Hale's Crown. I wanted to see what it's become. Anna's heart tightened. I hope we don't disappoint. The woman chuckled. Oh, I already like it better. It feels warmer. After the woman ordered, Anna went back to the kitchen. But when she returned with the meal, she found a small envelope on the table. The woman was gone. Inside was a note written in elegant handwriting. Kindness has a way of finding its way back home. Never stop sharing it. Anna folded the note carefully, her eyes stinging with quiet tears. When the restaurant closed that night, she placed the note beside her mother's photo. "Guess you were right, Mom," she whispered. "Everything does come full circle." The city outside glimmered like a promise, new, unbroken, alive. And as Anna turned off the lights, she realized that forgiveness wasn't just a gift to others. It was the final piece of healing she'd been searching for all along. Summer arrived early that year, and Crown Reborn had become more than a restaurant. It was a story. Magazines called it a symbol of humanity in business. Bloggers nicknamed Anna the waitress who changed the system. She laughed when she heard it, but deep down, she knew that title carried a responsibility she couldn't take lightly. One bright morning, she walked through the bustling kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, apron tied tight, helping the staff prep for lunch. The sound of sizzling pans, the clatter of plates and bursts of laughter filled the air. The energy was contagious. "Chef, how's the soup coming?" she called out. The head chef grinned. "Almost perfect. Needs a little more heart, boss." Anna laughed. "That's the secret ingredient around here." Edward entered then, his tie loosened, holding a stack of papers. "You might want to sit for this," he said, dropping them on the counter. She raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" "That good." He opened the top page. "Sales are up 45%. The community program you started, the one training underprivileged kids for restaurant work, it's being picked up by 3 other cities. You're building more than a business, Anna. You're building a movement." She stared at the papers, barely able to process it. "A movement?" she repeated softly. "It started with a pair of shoes." Edward smiled. Funny how the smallest cracks let the most light in. They moved to the dining area where a group of new trainees were setting tables. One of them, a teenage girl with nervous hands, dropped a fork. Anna knelt to help her pick it up. "Hey," she said gently. "You're doing great. The first week's always rough." The girl blushed. "I just don't want to mess up." Anna smiled. "You will. Everyone does. The trick is learning faster each time." The girl nodded, and for a moment Anna saw herself years ago, tired, scared, trying to survive a world that didn't care. Now she was the one to be making that world a little kinder. Later that afternoon, Edward found her standing by the window, watching the city hum below. "You ever stop to realize what you've built?" he asked. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "I'm too busy keeping it from falling apart." He chuckled. "That's how you know it's worth it." There was a pause. Then Edward said quietly, "I got a letter today. From him." She turned. "Richard?" He nodded. "He's being released early. Good behavior. He's volunteering for a non-profit that teaches business ethics to young entrepreneurs. Ironic, isn't it?" Anna let out a slow breath. "Maybe not. Maybe it's what he needed." Edward looked at her thoughtfully. "You don't hate him anymore, do you?" She shook her head. "Hate keeps you chained to the past. I let go of that a long time ago." He smiled. "You're wiser than most CEOs I've met." "I'm just a waitress who learned the hard way," she said. That evening, the restaurant filled again. The soft glow of the chandeliers, the hum of conversation, the warmth of community. It all felt like music. Near the entrance stood a new plaque on the wall, "Crown Reborn, a place for everyone." As Anna walked through the dining room, customers greeted her like an old friend. A woman thanked her for hiring her son. A man shook her hand, saying the restaurant had restored his faith in kindness. When she finally stepped outside for a breath of night air, the city lights reflected off the windows, shimmering like stars. She whispered to herself, "This is what healing looks like." Behind her, the restaurant doors swung open as laughter spilled into the street. And for the first time in her life, Anna realized she wasn't just fixing what was broken. She was teaching others how to build something better. The autumn wind carried a chill that hinted at change. Leaves swirled down the city sidewalks, like memories too stubborn to disappear. Inside Crown Reborn, the warm glow of the dining room wrapped guests in comfort. The air smelled of pumpkin soup, roasted herbs, and something that felt like home. Anna was in her office finishing the next month's training schedule when the hostess knocked gently. "Miss Parker," she said, "there's someone asking for you. He didn't give a name." Anna glanced at the clock. It was almost closing time. "Did he say what it's about?" The hostess hesitated. "He said, it's personal." Anna frowned but nodded. "All right. Send him in." When the door opened, her breath caught. Richard Hale stood there, thinner, older, his hair streaked with grey. But his posture, once proud and unbending, was softer now, his gaze steady but humble. "Evening," he said quietly. "Richard," she managed. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I wouldn't have come if it weren't important," he said, his voice calm, almost fragile. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Then sit. Let's talk." He took the seat, glancing around the office. "You changed everything. The place feels alive." "That was the point," she said. He nodded. "I read about you. You've built something remarkable." "I built what should have existed all along," she replied. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the restaurant outside filled the silence. Finally, he took a small envelope from his pocket and placed it on her desk. "What's this?" she asked. "My restitution," he said. "Part of the money I took. The court said I could pay it back over time, but I wanted you to have the first payment directly. It's not about the money. It's about respect." She looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "You taught me something I didn't know I'd forgotten. What it means to serve, not rule." His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time she saw the man he could have been, the man buried beneath pride and power for too long. "I'm working with kids now," he continued. "Teenagers who want to run businesses someday. I tell them about you, about the girl who got fired for her shoes and ended up owning the restaurant that fired her." Anna blinked, emotions swirling. "You tell them that story." He smiled faintly. "It gets their attention." There was a beat of silence, soft and strange. Then he said, "I came to ask for something. Not forgiveness. I already made peace with what I did. But maybe a chance to help again. In any way you'll let me." She leaned back, studying him. The man who once destroyed her dignity was now asking for trust. And against all logic, she didn't feel anger. She felt empathy. "What do you want to do?" she asked. He hesitated. "Start at the bottom. Wash dishes, sweep floors, whatever you need. Just honest work." Anna exhaled slowly. "You're serious?" "I am," he said. "Humility's a lot harder than prison, turns out." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But you work like everyone else. No favors, no shortcuts." He smiled, genuine and quiet. "Wouldn't want it any other way." That night, as the restaurant emptied, Richard rolled up his sleeves and helped the kitchen staff clean. The younger workers watched in disbelief, but Anna simply observed from her office window, a strange calm settling over her. When he finished, he looked up and caught her watching. For the first time in their long, tangled story, they both smiled, not as enemies, not as opposites, but as two people finally standing on level ground. And as the lights dimmed, Anna realized forgiveness wasn't about letting the past go. It was about allowing the future to begin. Winter came quietly. The first snow fell outside Crown Reborn, like a curtain of light, blanketing the city in calm. Inside, the restaurant glowed with golden warmth. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, jazz hummed in the background, and the smell of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts wrapped around the guests, like a memory they didn't know they'd missed. Anna stood by the bar, watching it all unfold. Tables were full, staff moved gracefully, and laughter filled every corner. It was everything she'd dreamed of, and more. Edward entered from the back, brushing snow from his coat. "Full house again," he said proudly. "You realize you've built one of the most successful restaurants in the city, right?" Anna smiled. "I realize it's not just mine. It belongs to everyone who helped rebuild it. He nodded approvingly. That's why it works. As he walked off to greet a table of investors, Anna's eyes landed on the kitchen. Through the small glass window, she saw Richard Hale, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing pans. His movements were slow but steady, his once manicured hands now calloused and honest. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod. She returned it. Later that night, after the last guests left, the restaurant emptied. The snow outside glowed under the streetlights. Anna sat at her office desk, reviewing the books. The numbers were good, better than she'd dared to hope. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. Richard stepped in, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Peace offering," he said. She smiled. "You're getting good at those." He chuckled, setting 1 mug in front of her. "It's the least I can do. You've been more forgiving than I deserve." Anna looked up at him. "Maybe. But everyone deserves a chance to make things right." He hesitated. "Even me?" "Especially you," she said. They sat in silence for a moment, the firelight flickering across the walls. Richard finally spoke. "You know, I used to think success was about having your name on something. But tonight, I realized it's about what your name stands for." Anna smiled softly. "And what does yours stand for now?" He thought for a long time before answering. "Gratitude, I hope, and second chances." She raised her mug. "To both." They clinked cups. Edward entered just then, holding a folded magazine. "You two made the front page again," he said, tossing it on the desk. The headline read, "Crown Reborn, where kindness became the secret ingredient." Anna laughed, shaking her head. "They make it sound like I planned all this." Edward smiled. "Maybe you didn't plan it, but you earned it." He turned to Richard. "How's the kitchen treating you?" Richard grinned wryly. "Let's just say I've learned the art of humility. 1 dish at a time." Edward clapped him on the shoulder. "That's worth more than any stock portfolio." When he left, Anna and Richard sat quietly, watching the snow outside. The city lights reflected off the window, turning everything golden. Richard stood. "You know, this place, it's more than just a restaurant now." Anna nodded. "It's a story." He smiled. "And for once, it has a good ending." She tilted her head. "No, it has a good beginning." He laughed softly. "Fair point." As he left for the night, Anna walked to the front doors and looked out at the falling snow. The reflection of Crown Reborn shimmered in the glass behind her. The words below the sign, her words, glowed faintly. "Be kind. Everyone's fighting a battle you can't see." She whispered to herself, "Guess that includes me too." The snow kept falling, soft and endless, as the city slept. And in that quiet glow, the girl once shamed for her old shoes stood as the woman who built an empire out of grace. Proof that dignity, once lost, can always be reborn. So that's how the story ends. But hey, my friend, you're still here, aren't you? If you made it all the way to this moment, something in this story must have touched you. Maybe it reminded you that dignity can't be taken, only forgotten. Maybe it whispered that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. Anna's journey wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding, piece by piece, the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but simply stands tall. The Stoics said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." That's exactly what she lived. The pain didn't stop her. It shaped her. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's what healing looks like, not escaping the storm, but learning to dance in the rain. So if you've ever been humiliated, overlooked, or told you're not enough, remember, you're not defined by the fall, but by the rise that comes after. If this story stirred something in you, give it a like. Share it with someone who needs hope tonight, and hit that subscribe button. Because here, we believe every scar has a story, and every story deserves a second chance.